Robert Chen stood in the gilded ballroom of the Grand Sterling Hotel, his frail frame draped in a hospital gown beneath a worn cardigan, his baseball cap barely concealing the effects of chemotherapy. Around him swirled an audience of wealth and privilege, gathered to watch chess Grandmaster Marcus Whitfield display his brilliance. When Robert approached to request a game, Marcus's laughter echoed through the room. The arrogant champion mocked the dying man's appearance, questioned his mental clarity, and publicly humiliated him before hundreds of spectators who watched in uncomfortable silence. Marcus had no idea who he was truly facing. What happened in the next 60 minutes would expose the Grandmaster's cruelty, reveal Robert's astonishing secret, and teach everyone present a lesson about judging by appearances that none of them would ever forget. The Grand Sterling Hotel's Imperial Ballroom was a monument to excess and exclusivity. Crystal chandeliers cascaded from the vaulted ceiling, their light refracting through thousands of precisely cut facets to bathe the room in a warm, golden glow. Marble columns lined the perimeter, each one veined with threads of real gold that caught the light with every subtle shift of perspective. The parquet floor gleamed with fresh polish, reflecting the designer shoes and haute couture gowns of the 300 guests who had paid $5,000 per seat to witness chess Grandmaster Marcus Whitfield demonstrate his genius. This was not a tournament. This was theater. A carefully orchestrated display where wealth and intellect intersected, where the elite could tell themselves they appreciated the finer things while sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a week. Marcus Whitfield stood at the center of it all. A king surveying his court. His tailored navy suit was cut from Italian wool so fine it seemed to ripple like water with each movement. The fabric alone cost more than $8,000, and Marcus made certain everyone knew it. His silk tie bore a subtle pattern of chess knights, a touch of whimsy that he considered clever branding. On his left wrist gleamed his signature platinum Patek Philippe watch, its face catching the chandelier light as he gestured expansively to the admirers clustered around him. At 32 years old, Marcus had been a chess prodigy who became a Grandmaster at 15, the youngest in American history at the time. But the years had transformed youthful confidence into something darker. Success had curdled into arrogance, and Marcus now measured people by their net worth and social standing as carefully as he calculated chess positions. He held court near the exhibition boards, his laugh too loud, his smile too practiced. When a middle-aged man in an obviously off-the-rack suit approached to ask about Marcus's famous game against the Russian champion, Marcus's eyes flickered dismissively over the man's clothing before offering a response so condescending it left the admirer stammering. Marcus turned away before the man finished thanking him, already scanning the room for more important people to acknowledge. His assistant, a nervous young man named Trevor, hovered nearby with a tablet, managing the carefully curated list of opponents who would play Marcus in simultaneous exhibition games. Each had been vetted, their chess ratings verified to ensure they would provide challenge enough to entertain, but not enough to threaten Marcus's inevitable victory. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. The ballroom's massive doors opened at precisely 7:15, and Robert Chen entered a world that seemed designed to exclude him. His appearance created an immediate ripple of reaction that spread through the gathered crowd like a stone dropped into still water. He wore a pale blue hospital gown that bore the faded logo of St. Mary's Medical Center, the kind of garment that announced illness and vulnerability with its very existence. Over it, he had pulled a simple gray cardigan, worn soft with age and washing, the buttons mismatched where one had been replaced. His frame was gaunt in the way that only aggressive chemotherapy could sculpt a body. His cheekbones sharp beneath skin that held an unhealthy pallor. A weathered Boston Red Sox baseball cap sat on his head, covering the hair loss that marked him as a patient still deep in treatment. His legs seemed almost too thin to support him, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to ration their limited energy. The stares began immediately. A woman in a crimson Valentino gown actually gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace, as if Robert's presence threatened her somehow. Two men in matching Armani tuxedos exchanged glances, and whispered behind raised champagne flutes. A cluster of socialites near the refreshment table turned away entirely, their body language screaming discomfort at this intrusion of mortality into their carefully constructed evening of leisure and status. Robert noticed the reactions but gave no indication they affected him. His dark eyes held a calm steadiness, an acceptance born not from defeat, but from a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. He scanned the room methodically, taking in the opulence, the chessboards arranged in precise rows, and finally settling on Marcus Whitfield, holding court near the center stage. Sarah Martinez saw him first from her position at the volunteer coordination table. As the evening's volunteer coordinator, she had spent the last 3 hours managing logistics and dealing with the demanding requests of wealthy patrons. When Robert approached her station, she rose immediately, her warm smile genuine and unrehearsed. She was 26, wearing a simple black dress that marked her as staff rather than guest, and her kindness was reflexive rather than calculated. "Robert," she said softly, her voice carrying real warmth, "you made it. I am so glad you are here." She had spoken with him twice on the phone over the past week, arranging his entry through a special provision for medical patients who had expressed interest in attending. Now she came around the table to greet him properly, taking his hand gently in both of hers. "How are you feeling?" Robert's smile was small but real. "I am managing," Robert replied quietly. "Thank you for helping me get here. I would like to request a game with Mr. Whitfield." Sarah's expression flickered with concern, but she nodded and guided him toward the registration table where Trevor stood with his tablet, managing the exhibition match requests. Trevor looked up as they approached, his professional smile faltering the moment he registered Robert's appearance. His eyes widened slightly, and he glanced nervously toward Marcus across the room. Trevor stammered, his finger hovering over the tablet screen. "I am not sure we have any more slots available for the simultaneous exhibition." Robert's voice remained steady and polite. "I was told there would be space for walk-in requests. I would very much like to play." Trevor's discomfort radiated from him in waves. He tugged at his collar, looked again toward Marcus, then back at Robert. "The thing is, sir, these matches are quite demanding. They require significant stamina and focus. Perhaps you would be more comfortable simply observing from the audience seating." The commotion had drawn attention. Several nearby guests turned to watch, their curiosity piqued by Trevor's obvious distress, and that was when Marcus noticed. He excused himself from his current admirers with a wave of his hand and strode toward the registration table, his expensive shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. His expression shifted from curiosity to disdain the moment he took in Robert's appearance. Marcus's voice carried across the space, loud enough for at least 50 people to hear. "Are you lost? This is a chess exhibition, not a medical charity event." The room seemed to hold its breath. Robert turned to face Marcus, his movements slow but dignified. "I am not lost," he said calmly. "I came to play chess." Marcus's laugh was sharp and cruel. He looked around at the gathering crowd, playing to them like an actor on stage. "You came to play chess." He repeated the words as if they were absurd. "Sir, with all due respect, you look like you should be in a hospital bed, not embarrassing yourself in front of 300 people. Do you even know where you are right now?" Robert took a slow, steadying breath. His hands trembled slightly at his sides, but his voice remained level. "I know exactly where I am. I am at the Grand Sterling Hotel. I came to play a game of chess with you." Marcus shook his head, his expression a theatrical mixture of disbelief and pity that was neither genuine nor kind. "This is not a place for people who need medical attention. This is an exclusive exhibition for serious chess enthusiasts." Marcus turned to address the crowd that had gathered, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of bewildered amusement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have a case of mistaken venue here. Perhaps someone confused the date of our hospital charity event. That is next month, sir." He directed this last part back at Robert, his tone dripping with condescension. "This evening is for patrons who have paid significant sums to support competitive chess." Several people in the crowd laughed, though the sound was uncomfortable and uncertain. Others shifted their weight, avoiding eye contact with Robert, their discomfort visible in their rigid postures. A woman near the back whispered something to her companion behind a raised hand. Marcus continued, emboldened by the attention. "Tell me, do you even know how the pieces move? Or did you see the word chess on a poster somewhere and think this might be a nice place to spend your evening? The knight moves in an L shape, in case you were wondering." Robert's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained calm when he spoke. "I know how to play chess. I am requesting a game." Marcus laughed again, louder this time. "You know how to play chess." He looked at Trevor, then back at the crowd. "Everyone here knows how to play chess, sir. But this is not a casual game night at a community center. This requires mental clarity, stamina, focus. Things that someone in your obvious condition cannot possibly possess. I am being honest with you for your own good. You would collapse halfway through a game." Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm despite her lower status in the room. "Mr. Whitfield, he has every right to request a game. We made arrangements for him to attend specifically because he wanted to play." Marcus turned his dismissive gaze on her, his expression cooling. "Miss Martinez, I appreciate your volunteerism, but you are not qualified to determine who is physically capable of playing in my exhibition. This gentleman clearly needs to be in a medical facility, not wandering into events where he does not belong." He turned back to Robert. "Sir, I am asking you politely to leave before you embarrass yourself further. This is not the place for you. You are confused, you are unwell, and frankly, you are disrupting an event that many people paid good money to attend." Robert met Marcus's eyes directly, his dignity unshaken despite the public humiliation. "I came here to play one game of chess. That is all I am asking." Marcus's expression hardened, the pretense of concern vanishing entirely. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone that carried to every corner of the nearby crowd. "Chess at this level requires sustained mental stamina and absolute clarity of thought. You need to calculate variations 15-20 moves deep. You need to maintain focus for hours at a time without your concentration wavering. Look at yourself." He gestured at Robert's frail frame with barely concealed disgust. "You can barely stand upright. Your hands are shaking. Whatever medications you are on have almost certainly compromised your cognitive function. You would be wasting my time, wasting all of these people's time. And honestly, you would be humiliating yourself in a way that I am trying to spare you from." Robert's hands did tremble slightly at his sides, a visible reminder of his body's betrayal. But he remained standing, his gaze steady on Marcus's face. Several people in the crowd now looked actively uncomfortable, their expressions troubled, but no one spoke up. No one challenged Marcus's cruelty. The Grandmaster had the power in this room, and they all knew it. Marcus turned to Trevor, raising his voice deliberately so everyone nearby could hear. "Make a note. We need to discuss better screening procedures with security for future events. We cannot have people wandering in off the street or apparently out of hospitals, disrupting carefully planned exhibitions. This is exactly the kind of situation that reflects poorly on the entire organization." Trevor nodded miserably, his face flushed with embarrassment at being made part of this public shaming. "Yes, sir. I will speak with the security team." Marcus looked back at Robert, his platinum watch catching the light as he checked the time with theatrical impatience. "Sir, you need to leave now, before you collapse and we have to call an ambulance, which would truly ruin everyone's evening. I am trying to be compassionate here, but you are testing my patience. This event is for people who belong in this environment, who understand what is being offered here. You clearly do not." Robert took a slow, deep breath, his chest rising and falling with the effort of maintaining his composure. His fingers curled slightly at his sides, steadying themselves. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried an unshakable resolve that cut through Marcus's bluster. "I came here to play one game of chess. Just one game. That is all I am asking for." Marcus stared at Robert for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, a smile spread across his face. It was not a kind smile. It was the expression of someone who had just realized how to extract maximum entertainment from an uncomfortable situation. He clapped his hands together once, sharply, drawing the attention of everyone in the vicinity. "You know what? Fine. Fine." He announced this to the crowd, his voice projecting across the ballroom. "I will play you. But let me be absolutely clear about what this is. This is an act of charity, an act of pity for someone who clearly does not understand what he is asking for." He turned to Trevor. "Set up a board in the center of the room. Center stage. And set the clock for a 5-minute blitz game. Total. 2.5 minutes per side." Trevor hesitated. "Sir, that is extremely fast for an exhibition." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Trust me, it will be over much more quickly than that. This gentleman can go back to where he belongs, and we can proceed with the actual event." He looked back at Robert. 5 minutes. Then you leave. Agreed?" Robert nodded slowly. "Agreed." The crowd's reaction split visibly. Some people looked relieved that the uncomfortable confrontation was ending. Others appeared troubled, their faces reflecting moral discomfort with what they were witnessing. A small group near the bar seemed entertained, leaning forward with anticipation as if watching a particularly dramatic reality television show. Trevor and 2 other staff members hurriedly arranged a chessboard and table in the very center of the ballroom, directly beneath the largest chandelier, where every person in the room would have an unobstructed view. They set up chairs on opposite sides and placed a digital chess clock between the positions. The location was strategic, calculated for maximum visibility. Marcus intended this to be a lesson, a public demonstration of the consequences of overreaching. Marcus gestured grandly toward the board. "Please, take your seat. Make yourself comfortable, though I suspect comfort will be difficult to achieve in your condition." Robert walked slowly to the board, each step measured and careful. Sarah stayed close beside him, her hand hovering near his elbow in case he stumbled. The crowd formed a loose circle around the central table, 3 and 4 people deep in places, everyone jockeying for a view. Marcus followed, loosening his shoulders theatrically like an athlete preparing for easy exercise. He sat down with fluid confidence, immediately hitting his clock to start Robert's time. Robert moved his king's pawn forward 2 squares, the standard opening. His hand shook slightly as he pressed the clock, starting Marcus's time. Marcus barely glanced at the board before responding instantly with his own king's pawn, mirroring the move. He did not look down again before beginning his commentary to the assembled audience. "Now, for those of you watching who we have just entered what is called a double king pawn opening. Very basic, very traditional." He moved his knight out casually, still not truly studying the position. This is the kind of opening you teach to children when they are first learning the game. Robert responded by developing his own knight, his movements slow and deliberate. Each piece placement seemed to require careful consideration, his fingers hovering over the pieces before committing to the move. Marcus continued talking as he played, his eyes on the crowd rather than the board. The key principles of opening play are simple. Control the center. Develop your pieces. Protect your king. He slid his bishop out with a flourish. These are concepts that take years to truly master, of course. The reflexive understanding of tempo, initiative, spatial advantage. He glanced briefly at the board, saw Robert's response, and moved immediately. "I assume you have played some casual games? Maybe online? Perhaps against a computer set to beginner mode." Several people in the crowd chuckled. Robert said nothing. He studied the position intently, his dark eyes moving across the board with absolute focus. He moved his bishop, placing it carefully on its square. Marcus made another quick move, a pawn push that gained space but created a subtle weakness he did not notice. Now, here is an interesting question for our audience. Can anyone tell me what the primary weakness in Black's position is right now? He did not wait for an answer. The backward pawn on the diagonal. It is a structural deficiency that will become significant in the endgame. Though I doubt we will reach an endgame here. Robert's next move was a quiet pawn advance on the flank, seemingly unrelated to the center action. Marcus laughed. Are you sure you know which pieces you are supposed to be moving? The important pieces are here, in the center. Not pushing pawns on the side like you are playing checkers. Do you need help remembering which piece is the queen? That is the tall one with the crown. More laughter from portions of the crowd, though many faces now reflected discomfort rather than amusement. Sarah stood behind Robert, her arms crossed tightly, her jaw set. Marcus continued his aggressive development, bringing pieces forward with flashy moves that looked impressive to casual observers, but lacked deeper strategic purpose. He castled kingside with a flourish, sliding his king to safety while announcing to the crowd that he was simply following textbook principles. Nothing fancy needed here. Just solid, fundamental chess. Robert's moves grew increasingly complex. He maneuvered his knight to an unusual square on the rim of the board, a position that violated the basic principle Marcus had just lectured about. Knights on the rim are grim, Marcus quoted with a smirk, shaking his head at Robert's choice. But please, continue. Maybe you have read something I have not. He moved his queen forward boldly, centralizing it with apparent dominance. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing as she studied the board. She had played chess casually in college, enough to recognize patterns. Robert's pieces were coordinating in a way that seemed deliberate, purposeful. The rim knight was not a mistake. It was controlling key squares that Marcus's queen now occupied. She bit her lip, not daring to speak but suddenly invested in the position unfolding before her. Near the edge of the crowd, an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes adjusted his glasses and stepped closer to the board. He was Gregory Parsons, a retired international master who had come to the exhibition out of professional curiosity. His expression shifted from bored observation to genuine interest as he studied Robert's last 3 moves. He tapped his companion on the shoulder and pointed at a specific diagonal, whispering something urgent. Marcus glanced at his platinum watch, making the gesture obvious and theatrical. You are playing remarkably slowly. I appreciate that you are trying to think through your moves, but at this rate we will be here all night. Perhaps you are not familiar with blitz time controls. The idea is to move with some degree of speed. Robert said nothing. He advanced another pawn, this one supporting the oddly placed knight, and creating what looked like a strange, cramped structure. Marcus laughed and immediately pushed a pawn to attack it, gaining more space and looking even more dominant. See? Overextension. You are creating weaknesses everywhere. 2 more serious chess players in the crowd had now noticed something unusual and moved closer, their casual conversation stopping as they focused on the position. The board was beginning to tell a story that contradicted Marcus's confident commentary. Robert reached forward and moved his bishop to a square that appeared modest, almost passive. The move looked like nothing, but Marcus's hand, reaching confidently for a piece, suddenly froze. His eyes locked onto the board. He stared at the position for 5 full seconds. Then 10. His smile faltered, the corners of his mouth twitching downward. He leaned forward slightly, scanning the board with genuine attention for the first time since the game began. The quiet bishop move had created a discovery threat that Marcus had completely missed. His centralized queen was suddenly trapped, unable to retreat without massive material loss. His king's position, which had seemed secure moments ago, was now exposed to a devastating attack along the weakened diagonal. Marcus's jaw tightened. He studied the position intently, calculating variations with visible concentration. The crowd sensed the shift in energy immediately. Conversations died. People leaned in. Marcus finally moved, relocating his queen to what appeared to be a safer square while maintaining some attacking chances. He pressed the clock harder than necessary. His voice carried forced confidence, a temporary complication. Nothing I did not anticipate. I am still completely winning here. Robert's response came immediately, without the hesitation that had marked his earlier play. His hand moved decisively, his rook sliding into position with surgical precision. The move was devastating. It attacked 2 pieces simultaneously, while opening another line toward Marcus's exposed king. Marcus's eyes widened. He studied the board frantically, his previous composure evaporating. His king was in immediate danger, his queen still struggling to find effective squares, and his entire position was crumbling under the weight of Robert's coordinated pieces. Gregory Parsons let out a low whistle. The retired international master turned to the player beside him, speaking in an urgent whisper that carried through the suddenly quiet crowd. That is a forced sequence. He is in serious trouble. At least 3 pieces are hanging. Another chess player, a woman with an expert rating, pointed at the board. Look at the knight fork coming. If he takes the rook, the king is exposed completely. Marcus's expression transformed from amused superiority to focused concentration. His hand hovered over multiple pieces, considering and rejecting options. Sweat began to form on his forehead. The 5-minute blitz game suddenly seemed far too long. Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he finally made his move, a defensive retreat that sacrificed a pawn to relieve some of the immediate pressure. His commentary to the crowd had ceased entirely. The Grandmaster, who had been performing for an audience, now sat hunched over the board, all pretense of casual superiority abandoned. Robert responded within seconds. Another precise move, another layer of tactical complexity that tightened the noose around Marcus's position. The coordination of Robert's pieces was suffocating. Every piece worked in harmony, controlling key squares, restricting Marcus's options, creating threats faster than they could be addressed. The crowd's energy had completely transformed. Whispers rippled through the assembled guests like wind through tall grass. People who had been standing casually now pressed forward, craning their necks to see the board. Those with chess experience narrated the position to companions in urgent, hushed tones. This is incredible. He is dismantling him completely. Where did this man come from? Marcus pulled at his silk tie, loosening it with sharp, frustrated movements. Sweat beaded visibly on his forehead, catching the chandelier light. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, staring at the position with an expression that cycled through disbelief, concentration, and growing panic. He moved a knight desperately, trying to create counterplay, to generate some threat against Robert's king that might distract from his collapsing position. Robert's response neutralized the threat effortlessly, while simultaneously increasing the pressure. A quiet pawn advance that supported his attacking pieces and further restricted Marcus's mobility. It was clinical, precise, the play of someone who understood chess at a level that transcended mere calculation. Marcus tried to mount a defense, retreating pieces, building a fortress around his increasingly vulnerable king. But Robert's advantage was overwhelming. Material was roughly equal, but positionally, Marcus was being systematically crushed. Every exchange favored Robert. Every piece trade simplified into an endgame that Marcus could not hold. The digital clock continued counting down, but it had become irrelevant. This was no longer a 5-minute blitz game. This had become something else entirely. A demonstration. A lesson. Marcus played on, his moves growing slower, each decision requiring agonizing calculation as he searched desperately for resources that did not exist. Gregory Parsons shook his head slowly, speaking to no one in particular. I have not seen technique like this in years. This is mastery. Marcus's position had deteriorated beyond repair. Robert's pieces encircled his king like wolves surrounding wounded prey. Checkmate was inevitable within the next 4 or 5 moves, visible to anyone who understood chess beyond a casual level. Marcus's hand reached toward his bishop, hesitated, then withdrew. He reached for his rook, paused, calculating frantically, then pulled back again. His hands shook visibly now, the tremor unmistakable. The arrogant Grandmaster who had mocked Robert's physical condition now displayed his own weakness. His composure shattered completely. He searched the board desperately, his eyes darting across squares, looking for the escape route that simply did not exist. Every variation led to the same conclusion: loss, humiliation, defeat at the hands of the dying man he had publicly ridiculed. The chess players in the crowd no longer bothered to whisper. Their discussions carried clearly through the ballroom. That bishop sacrifice 6 moves ago was brilliant. Did you see how it opened the entire kingside? Gregory Parsons spoke with undisguised admiration. The precision is extraordinary. Every move serves multiple purposes. This is not club-level play. This is world-class technique. A younger player beside him nodded vigorously. Who is this man? I have never heard of him. Marcus made one final attempt, a desperate rook sacrifice that created a brief flash of counterplay, a tactical trick that might confuse an amateur player or force an error under time pressure. It was the kind of swindle that Marcus himself had pulled off against weaker opponents countless times. A last gasp effort to create complications from nothing. Robert did not hesitate. His hand moved immediately to capture the rook, then followed with a quiet king move that sidestepped the entire trap. The combination Marcus had hoped would save him evaporated instantly, effortlessly crushed by someone who had seen through the deception before Marcus had even completed the move. The execution was flawless, instantaneous. The response of a mind that calculated variations with absolute clarity. Marcus stared at the board. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale beneath the chandelier light. His expensive suit suddenly seemed too tight, constricting. His platinum watch felt heavy on his wrist. Around him, 300 people watched in absolute silence as the arrogant Grandmaster sat frozen, completely and utterly humiliated by the frail cancer patient he had mocked. Marcus's hand moved slowly, almost mechanically, to his king. He gripped the piece, his knuckles white with tension, and tipped it over with a sharp click against the wooden board. The traditional gesture of resignation. The game was over. For a long moment nothing happened. The ballroom existed in a pocket of stunned silence. 300 people collectively holding their breath as they processed what they had just witnessed. The arrogant Grandmaster had been dismantled, systematically destroyed by the dying man he had humiliated. Then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, a single person began to clap. The sound cut through the silence like a stone through glass. Another person joined, then another. Within seconds, applause rippled through the ballroom, building in volume and intensity. It was not polite applause, it was the sound of people witnessing something extraordinary. Something that had shaken their assumptions about the world. Who is that man? A woman near the front asked her companion, her voice carrying over the applause. How did he just beat Marcus Whitfield? Did anyone recognize him? Another voice called out. I have never seen him at any tournaments. That was not amateur play, Gregory Parsons announced loudly, his professional authority carrying weight. That was world-class chess. Absolute mastery of endgame technique. Marcus sat frozen at the board, unable to move, unable to process what had just occurred. His mind cycled through the game, searching for the moment where it had all gone wrong, replaying moves and variations in desperate retrospect. His face remained pale, his expression hollow. The confidence that had defined him an hour ago had been stripped away entirely, leaving only raw shock and the crushing weight of public failure. Robert rose slowly from his chair, using the edge of the table for support. The effort of the game had drained what little energy his ravaged body possessed. His legs shook, and for a moment it seemed he might fall. Sarah was beside him instantly, her hand on his elbow, steadying him. The crowd's questions continued, growing more insistent, but before anyone could approach Robert directly, the crowd parted. A distinguished older gentleman in his late 60s moved through the opening with quiet authority. His suit was impeccably tailored, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, and he carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. His silver hair was swept back from a strong, intelligent face. Dr. Harrison Whitfield, Marcus's father, president of the International Chess Federation. Dr. Whitfield stopped 3 feet from Robert, his eyes studying the frail man's face with a mixture of recognition and profound sadness. When he spoke, his voice carried across the now silent ballroom with absolute clarity. "Robert Chen. It has been too long." The name hung in the air. Several people in the crowd reacted immediately. Gasps of recognition from those old enough to remember. Younger attendees looked confused, exchanging glances and shrugging. But the serious chess players knew. Gregory Parsons actually staggered back a step, his hand going to his mouth. "Doctor." Whitfield turned to address the assembled crowd, his voice taking on the formal tone of someone delivering an important announcement. "For those of you who may not know, you have just witnessed something extraordinary. Robert Chen is not simply a chess player. 15 years ago, he was considered the greatest chess mind of his generation. He was ranked third in the world. He was a former world championship contender who came within one game of claiming the title. His games are studied in chess academies around the globe. His endgame technique was legendary. His positional understanding was compared to the classical masters." The crowd erupted in whispers and exclamations. People pulled out their phones, frantically searching for information. The energy in the room transformed from confusion to shock to awe. Dr. Whitfield continued, his eyes moving across the sea of faces. "Robert disappeared from competitive chess 15 years ago, at the height of his powers. The chess world mourned his loss. We speculated endlessly about why someone with such extraordinary talent would simply walk away. But he had found something more important than chess. He devoted himself to cancer research, becoming one of the leading oncologists in his field. His work has saved thousands of lives, and now the disease he spent his life fighting has claimed him." Behind Dr. Whitfield, Marcus remained frozen in his chair. The color had not returned to his face. His expression cycled through disbelief, horror, and crushing shame as the full weight of his actions settled on him. He had not simply been cruel to a dying man. He had publicly humiliated a legend, someone who had forgotten more about chess than Marcus would ever know. He had mocked a genius, and that genius had destroyed him on the chessboard with an ease that now made perfect, terrible sense. Dr. Whitfield's voice softened, taking on a tone of deep respect. After Robert left competitive chess, he completed his medical degree and dedicated himself entirely to oncology research. He made breakthrough discoveries in targeted chemotherapy treatments that have saved thousands of lives. His research on pancreatic cancer treatments revolutionized survival rates. Medical journals published his findings. Hospitals adopted his protocols. While the chess world lost a champion, the world gained something far more valuable. He paused, his expression heavy with the weight of irony. And now, the disease he spent 15 years fighting has turned on him. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The very disease he understood so intimately. He devoted his life to saving others from this, and now it claims him. The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. The crowd's entire emotional landscape had shifted in moments. People who had laughed at Marcus's cruel jokes now looked ill, their faces reflecting shame and horror at their complicity. The woman in the crimson Valentino gown, who had gasped at Robert's appearance, now had tears streaming down her face. The men who had whispered behind their champagne flutes stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Eyes turned toward Marcus, and the looks were no longer neutral or entertained. They were disgusted, contemptuous. The Grandmaster remained in his chair, his world collapsing around him. Someone in the crowd spoke, her voice shaking with emotion. "You humiliated him. You mocked a dying man who has saved thousands of lives." "How could you?" Others murmured agreement. The disapproval building, like a wave. Robert raised one trembling hand, a gesture asking for quiet. When the room settled, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying through the space. "It is all right. I came for the chess." The humility of the statement, the absence of anger or vindictiveness, somehow made Marcus's cruelty even more stark in contrast. Robert swayed slightly on his feet, exhaustion overwhelming him. Sarah tightened her grip on his arm, her face creased with concern. He nodded his acknowledgement to Dr. Whitfield, a small gesture between old colleagues, then turned slowly toward the exit. Each step looked like it required immense effort. Dr. Whitfield turned to face his son, and the disappointment in his expression was more devastating than any anger could have been. Marcus remained seated at the chessboard, unable to rise, unable to speak. The weight of his father's gaze pinned him in place. "Marcus, doctor." Whitfield's voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "Stand up." Marcus rose on shaking legs, his expensive suit suddenly looking ridiculous. Costume rather than clothing. His father stepped closer, and though he did not raise his voice, every word landed with precision. "I did not raise you to treat human beings with such cruelty. I did not teach you chess so you could wield it as a weapon to humiliate the vulnerable. What you displayed tonight was not strength. It was cowardice. It was beneath the dignity of this game and beneath the standards of basic human decency." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words emerged. "Doctor," Whitfield continued, addressing both his son and the assembled crowd. "Effective immediately, Marcus Whitfield is suspended from all exhibition matches and International Chess Federation events pending a full review by the Ethics Committee. His conduct tonight violated every principle that chess represents: respect, integrity, the understanding that this game transcends ego and status." The announcement sent another ripple through the crowd. Marcus's face crumbled. "Dad, please. I did not know. I did not realize who he was." "That is precisely the problem," Dr. Whitfield said sharply. "You did not know who he was, so you felt entitled to treat him with contempt. His worth as a human being should not depend on his chess rating or his name recognition." Marcus turned desperately toward Robert, who Sarah had helped into a nearby chair. His exhaustion was evident in every line of his body. "Mr. Chen, I am so sorry. Please, I apologize. I was wrong. I should never have spoken to you that way. I was completely out of line." The words tumbled out quickly, driven by panic and fear of consequences rather than genuine remorse. The apology rang hollow, a performance designed to salvage what could be salvaged. Robert looked up at Marcus, his dark eyes exhausted but still holding that steady calm. He nodded slowly. "I accept your apology." His voice was barely audible now, his energy completely spent. Robert's acceptance of the apology seemed to drain the last of his reserves. His head dropped forward slightly, his breathing becoming labored and shallow. The hand resting on the chair arm trembled continuously now, and his skin had taken on a grayish pallor that alarmed everyone watching. Sarah knelt beside him immediately, her hand on his shoulder. "Robert, we need to get you medical attention. Now." She looked up at the crowd desperately. "Someone call an ambulance, please." Two people pulled out their phones simultaneously. Within minutes, the sound of sirens approached outside the Grand Sterling Hotel. The crowd had gone completely silent, the celebratory atmosphere of the exhibition replaced by something somber and heavy. Paramedics arrived with a stretcher and equipment, moving through the parted crowd with professional efficiency. They assessed Robert quickly, checking his vital signs, asking questions about his medical history and current treatment. Robert answered weakly, his voice fading. As they prepared to transfer him to the stretcher, Dr. Whitfield approached and knelt beside him. "Robert, your research. The pancreatic cancer protocols. Are they documented? Will the work continue?" Robert's eyes focused on Dr. Whitfield's face, and despite his exhaustion, a small smile touched his lips. "Everything is documented. My team knows the work. It will continue. That is all that matters." They spoke for another moment in low voices, not about chess or the game that had just concluded, but about clinical trials and research funding, and the hope that Robert's discoveries would outlive him. It was a conversation between two men who understood that some things mattered more than glory or recognition. Across the ballroom, Marcus stood alone. His father had moved away. The crowd avoided him as if he carried something contagious. He watched the paramedics load Robert onto the stretcher, watched Sarah climb into the ambulance beside him, and the weight of what he had done pressed down on him with suffocating force. Not just the loss, not just the humiliation, but the cruelty. The unnecessary casual cruelty toward a man who had days or weeks left to live. The crowd parted silently as the paramedics wheeled Robert toward the exit. No one spoke. The exhibition ended without announcement, guests filing out in subdued clusters. By morning, the story had spread through chess forums and medical communities alike. Videos taken on phones circulated online. The chess world mourned. The medical community celebrated Robert's legacy while grieving his condition. And everyone asked the same question. How could Marcus Whitfield have been so cruel? 2 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Robert Chen passed away peacefully in his home, surrounded by his wife of 23 years, his 2 daughters, and the hospice nurse who had cared for him in his final days. He died as he had lived, with quiet dignity and grace, slipping away without drama or struggle. The news reached the media by afternoon, and the coverage that followed focused not on the chess match that had gone viral, but on the extraordinary life he had led. Major newspapers ran obituaries celebrating his contributions to cancer research. Medical journals published tributes detailing his breakthrough discoveries in targeted chemotherapy. Colleagues wrote remembrances describing his brilliance, his dedication, and his refusal to seek recognition for work he considered simply necessary. The chess world mourned deeply. International chess forums filled with tributes from players who had studied his games decades ago, and from younger players who were only now discovering the genius they had lost. Many learned of his greatness for the first time through the circumstances of his death, and they mourned not just the man but the years of competitive chess the world had been denied when he chose a different path. Marcus Whitfield withdrew from public chess entirely. He canceled upcoming tournaments, declined interview requests, and disappeared from the exhibition circuit that had defined his career. Those close to him reported that he barely ate, barely slept, consumed by a grief mixed with shame that threatened to destroy him. The video of his cruelty played in his mind endlessly. He could not escape it, could not forgive himself. Dr. Whitfield, channeling his own grief into action, announced the establishment of the Robert Chen Memorial Foundation 3 days after Robert's funeral. The foundation would fund pancreatic cancer research and provide grants supporting patients who wished to pursue their passions and interests during treatment, whether that meant playing chess, painting, writing, or any other meaningful activity. The foundation would ensure that terminal illness did not steal every moment of joy and purpose from those fighting it. The first beneficiary was a 12-year-old girl who wanted to continue her violin studies during chemotherapy. Robert would have approved. 6 months after Robert Chen's death, Marcus Whitfield sat in the activities room of St. Mary's Medical Center, the same hospital whose logo had been printed on the gown Robert wore that night. He came here 3 times a week now, volunteering his time to teach chess to patients undergoing treatment. The arrogance that had once defined him had been stripped away, replaced by something quieter and more substantial. Humility learned through service, purpose found through helping others. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, a young girl named Emma approached his table. She was 9 years old, rail thin from chemotherapy, wearing a bright pink hat over her bald head. She clutched a worn chess set under her arm. Her voice was small but determined. Mr. Whitfield? I heard you teach chess. Marcus looked at her and saw Robert Chen, saw the courage it took to approach despite physical frailty, saw the hunger for normalcy, for engagement with something beyond illness. His chest tightened with emotion, but his smile was genuine and warm. I would be honored to play with you, Emma. Please, sit down. He helped her set up the board, treating each piece placement with the same care he would show a world championship match. They began to play, and Marcus gave her his complete attention. When she made a clever tactical move, capturing his bishop with a discovered attack, he clapped his hands together in genuine delight. That was brilliant. Did you see that coming 3 moves ago? Emma's face lit up with pride. I did. I set up the trap. Marcus nodded seriously. You are a natural tactician. That kind of forward planning takes real skill. As they continued playing, Marcus shared Robert's story with her. He told her about a man who was one of the greatest chess players in the world, who gave it all up to save lives like hers. He told her about dignity and grace, about treating every person with respect regardless of how they looked or what circumstances they faced. He did not tell her about his own cruelty, but Emma was perceptive. "You were mean to him, weren't you?" she asked quietly. Marcus met her eyes honestly. "Yes, I was, and it is the biggest regret of my life. But he taught me something important. He taught me that every person deserves respect and kindness, especially when they are fighting battles we cannot see." 1 year after Robert Chen's death, Marcus Whitfield stood at a podium in the main conference hall of the American Medical Association's annual summit. Before him sat 300 physicians, oncologists, and researchers. The topic was unexpected for a chess grandmaster: the cognitive and emotional benefits of chess for patients undergoing cancer treatment. Marcus spoke with quiet authority, born not from arrogance but from genuine experience and dedication. Chess provides structure when life feels chaotic. It offers control when so much feels beyond control. For patients facing terminal diagnoses, the ability to strategize, to plan, to engage their minds fully can be profoundly therapeutic. He presented data compiled through the Robert Chen Memorial Foundation showing improved cognitive function, reduced anxiety, and enhanced quality of life for patients who engaged in regular chess play during treatment. The audience listened intently, many taking notes. This was not the Marcus Whitfield the chess world had known. Dr. Whitfield sat in the front row, watching his son with visible pride. 3 months earlier, he had formally reinstated Marcus in the International Chess Federation after a comprehensive ethics review. But Marcus had returned to competitive chess, different, fundamentally changed. He was humble now, thoughtful in his interactions, quick to praise opponents, and slow to celebrate his own victories. He used his platform not for self-promotion but to advocate for the programs he had come to believe in passionately. The Robert Chen Memorial Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. It had funded 3 major research initiatives into pancreatic cancer treatments, building directly on Robert's original work. Dozens of hospitals now hosted chess programs for patients, supported by foundation grants. Lives were being changed, saved, honored. In Marcus's office, on his desk, beside his computer, sat a framed photograph. It showed Robert Chen at the chessboard that night, his face gaunt, but his eyes focused with absolute clarity on the position before him. Marcus looked at that photograph every single day, sometimes for only a moment, sometimes for long minutes, remembering. The photo was not punishment. It was reminder, a teacher's final lesson preserved in a single image. Every person deserves dignity. Every person deserves respect. These truths were simple, but Marcus had needed to learn them through profound failure and devastating loss. Marcus Whitfield's transformation was complete. The arrogant champion who had once measured people by their appearance and status had become a humble servant of the game and the community it could serve. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, he taught chess at cancer treatment centers across the city, treating each student with the dignity and respect they deserved. At the Grand Sterling Hotel, the Imperial Ballroom now featured a bronze memorial plaque mounted near the entrance. It read, "In memory of Robert Chen, chess master, medical pioneer, and teacher of life's greatest lesson." His legacy reminds us that true worth cannot be measured by appearance, and true strength lies in dignity, grace, and service to others. The plaque had been unveiled 6 months earlier in a quiet ceremony attended by Robert's family, the chess community, and the dozens of patients whose lives had been touched by the foundation bearing his name. On this particular Thursday evening, Marcus sat in the bright activities room of St. Mary's Medical Center. 7 students arranged around tables before him. They ranged from age 8 to 73. Some wore hats to cover hair loss. Others showed the visible effects of treatment in their gaunt faces and trembling hands. Marcus treated each one as he would treat a grandmaster, listening intently to their questions, celebrating their clever moves, offering encouragement that was genuine rather than patronizing. He saw Robert Chen in every one of them, and he honored that man's memory through every interaction. How often do we judge others by what we see on the surface? How many times have we dismissed someone because they did not look the part, did not dress correctly, did not fit our narrow expectations of what success or worth should look like? Robert Chen taught the world a lesson that extends far beyond chess. He showed us that every person carries within them stories we cannot see, battles we cannot know, and value that has nothing to do with appearance or status. One moment of cruelty cost Marcus Whitfield everything he thought defined him, but it gave him something far more valuable. The understanding that how we treat others in our moments of power reveals who we truly are. We never know who we might be underestimating. We never know what battles someone is fighting behind the facade we see. True greatness is not measured by our victories, our titles, or our accomplishments. It is measured by our kindness, our compassion, and our willingness to see the inherent worth in every human being we encounter.